Yeah. All right, everyone. This is another round of another round. As you can see, we are not doing so well.
Sometimes the round just has to wait a minute to fully turn around.
Yeah, sometimes the people involved behind the scenes are out of control and not doing great. So let's pretend that part didn't happen. Scott, let's go ahead and start over, right? Let's do this.
I don't know what you're talking about. There it is.
Right, and let's do this. Yeah, okay.
Yay!
Take two. Okay. So tonight, we are incredibly lucky that we have an old friend of mine, Ed Laroche, who is a brilliant comic book artist and a brilliant storyboard artist. He's going to be joining us to talk about Arcane, and he's going to join us. Here he is. Hi, Ed. Sorry for the overt professionalism that is around and doing live streams. So I'm so glad you can join us. It's good to see you, man.
Awesome. It's great to be here.
Yeah, let me make sure the music
Hey,
is
Ed.
off.
Hey, Scott. Nice to meet you.
How you doing?
Good.
Okay, there we go.
It's
Now
so
let's
funny.
begin.
Sometimes I get onto these meetings and they're sending me like different chat platforms, and you're like trying to scramble to make it
Right.
work. You're like, okay, how's this gonna, but this one was relatively okay. So
All right. Yeah, I'm technically on vacation at the moment, and so I am not operating from home. So I'm trying to spitball and chicken wire a bunch of things together, and so I think we're going to be okay.
nice.
But you're here, and that's all that matters.
Hey,
Yeah,
I'm ready.
man, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in, what is it, like 4 or 5 years? Has it been that long? I think the last time I saw you was right before I left Los Angeles. We were hanging out at that I forget the name of the bar, that one over there in Toluca Lake, that place that had the fabulous lunch, and you and me and Paul and other people showed up all the time.
Yeah. I forget what that was called, but that's got to be at least 5 years ago, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Man, time flies.
Yeah.
Time super
And
flies.
you don't look back, right? You love the fact that you left, and
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I loved my time in LA. I loved working at the studios. I loved working in animation, but Oregon has trees and water and streams and lakes, and I really love it there. It's great.
How would you say that the coronavirus has changed your remote working situation?
You know what's interesting is that I feel like so many people, like I was already doing the freelance thing, so it was very easy for me to continue just to do that. And I do think that the studios in general are much more open to people being off-site. So it's actually made things easier for me in a way. How about you?
Yeah, it's so weird because there he is.
Hey,
Jonesy.
it's so disconcerting to see the show you're supposed to be on playing and not be on it.
Right.
I feel like it's being backstage in a play, and they're saying your cue line, and you're not there yet.
Oh my god!
Which is an experience I've had, by the way.
You're on. You're supposed to be on stage.
Ed, yay!
What I was going to say was
see you.
that it's so strange because I want to say for the past 9 or 10 years in animation, there was definitely this push to get at the very least storyboards out of the studio. They want. I've seen productions where they have 1 or 2 revision guys and gals.
Right.
And that's the way that they want it. And then COVID hits, I'm ready. Except for one thing, I didn't have Storyboard Pro.
Oh, really?
No, I didn't. So they actually the last animation gig I was on, which is actually connected to what we're going to be talking about today, is a comic book adaptation of a pre-existing video game called Ark.
Okay.
Survival Evolved. And I think it's fascinating because I think what's happening now, I think you're going to see a lot of these video game companies with really deep pockets investing in this kind of content. Some people have a problem with the word content, but with investing in this type of effort to loop in people that don't play these games into the story.
Right.
And I think Arcane is like the perfect example of that happening successfully.
Well, I mean, apart from being gorgeous, I found that the storytelling was amazing. I found that the designs were fabulous. And I never really played League of Legends. Did you? Are you familiar with the game?
I was aware of it, but I didn't play it. And I love video games.
Right. Well, it's huge. I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon, and I think that the fact that they were able to turn it into a really compelling narrative is impressive.
I agree. I'm looking at Scott's Doctor Strange there.
Oh, nice.
I'll just keep doodling. You guys keep yakking.
Before the facial hair, I thought Scott was doing Namor.
Right.
But I think definitely they're two related characters in their early looks for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess speaking to what you're saying about deep pockets, Ed, I feel like somewhere online we were talking about Arcane, and someone, a fellow storyboard artist that we know, I think, piped up about the fact that apparently their storyboarding schedule was quite a bit more relaxed time-wise than what most of us are used to in TV. I think. Don't quote me on it, but I think he was saying something like 4 to 5 months.
Wow. For a single episode or for the whole series?
I believe for a single episode, but don't quote me on that.
It shows. It really shows, though. I mean, it's so bizarre because I rewatched the first episode just for this conversation, and it's interesting because I've had friends who only gave it 2 episodes, and they were like, "This isn't for me," And I know those guys would like it, and guys mostly, if they were to at least stick to the 3rd episode, because there are things that are being set up in the first episode that it completely, it just changes,
Right.
And the thing about it is the story really moves. And the thing that really blows me away about the show is it doesn't surprise me that the rumor is like 3 or 4 months per episode, because there's so much going on in it that there's no way you could do it on a normal animated schedule.
Schedule.
Yeah.
Even just this opening drawing.
Yeah.
Well, like it has, I mean, you and we've all done comics and storyboard animation and comic design and character design, and like just the amount of thought and pre-planning that goes into just something as simple as like, oh, we're going to have a record play that's going to have a very Art Nouveau design element in this record, and it's going to set up this entire world that is kind of steampunky, but not like, it really sets the tone, and it really stays true to the video game League of Legends, right? But like just in the very first moment, this is a gorgeous, well-balanced, well-thought-out drawing.
It is. And it's deep too. It's like you look at every corner, every shot is deep. It's not superficial. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
It's deep in both ways, right? I think, Ed, you're speaking to emotional depth because you're an emotionally deep dude. But I think also there's a tremendous amount of like almost every time they could pick a shot, they found a way to have a shot that had some dimension in it. You know, they almost never pick the flat version of a shot, you know.
Right.
And this is the first, I mean, we get to see these first two characters who are very popular in the game, but like even before we get to meet them, we see that this is the story about them.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, that's funny. I never made that connection until you mentioned it. But that's funny because the title sequence, when you first watch the show, the title sequence is really pretty to look at. The whole sort of sculpted figures, you know.
Yeah, those statues and stuff, yeah.
But when you get to the end of it and you know who those people are, you go back and you look at it again, you're like, oh, it's all there. They all kind of, the story is like set up in the title sequence. You know?
I have. So I downloaded the first, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Ed, is the way the storyboards are laid out, like the way the shots are selected. And I think that it just shows a level of competence and artistic integrity, and also just really good shot selection. Like this is the first shot that we get. So we get the world, and I love. I'm not really that sophisticated when it comes to color, but I can at least recognize when you are using color to establish an emotional context, right? Like, and so this is the first shot, and then we go to
tremendous depth, you know?
Right? Like this is the world we're
experiencing. But also lots of energy, a lot of anger and emotion about it.
That's beautiful.
And then cutting in more to this is the sculpture, this is sort of the architecture.
Yep.
And then hang on a second. Where is? Sorry, guys.
Very cold face,
right?
Emotionally.
And then we immediately like shit's blowing up.
Yep.
I mean, think about what you're looking at in this shot. Now, I just spent the whole past year calling out stuff like this on storyboards, and so you have. It looks like you've got this special effect cloud dust at the bottom. You have the figure in a silhouette and this glow, and then you've got this animated explosion, you know, and this great painted background that just forces your eyes straight into that action.
Right, you can't help but look at it.
Yeah.
Paper.
And the sort of Dutch angle going on there. It's extremely beautiful. Hey,
you know what, Ed? Can I back up a bit? Because you and I have been friends for a long time, and you know Steve, and like so we all. I don't know if
fair to say that Steve and I have, or Ed and I have been friends longer than you, Jeff. But just whatever, go on.
Of course. Well, that's one of the things I wanted to quick back up and cover. So, you guys have known each other since, what was it, Ghostbusters?
Extreme Ghostbusters.
Was that? Yeah.
That's our first. Ed was rocking an amazing kind of Terrence Trent D'Arby look back then, in '97. I think I was growing my hair out, and so I had kind of a classic Johnny Blaze thing, sort of that I was attempting to do, and we were in that crazy Sony TV animation. Kind of like prison yard thing where they had us all in those queues, but they had like the production people like walking above us
that, like,
with the shotguns.
The offices were around, and then everyone down below they could see whether you were working or not.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's some big brother you got going on.
Ed's
no joke.
Ed's one of the first guys that I met and befriended on that show, and I never realized. So Tom Ryder and I. So Tom is a guy who used to ink comics, and he went on to ink Jeff's amazing run on Way of the Rat, and he's like the nicest.
You know what? I've never apologized to Tom enough for tricking him into coming all the way out to Florida to work on that, to work on my book for a couple of years.
Yeah, you effectively
from California.
You tricked.
Tom's one of my Kubert buddies.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you tricked Tom's one of the nicest curmudgeons that I've ever met.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
By the way, hi to Ryan Kincaid. Hey, buddy. Good to see you're watching us. On the comments. But and then Tom, Tom and I started on the same day. They initially put us next to the bathroom, and then they took pity on us, and they moved us to this one spot. And then I was like, man, the people at Sony are so friendly. People are always coming by to say hi and shoot the shit. Ed was one of those people. And it wasn't until Tom and I had been there about 2.5 months that I learned that Tom and I had replaced where the vending machines were. And so
everyone came by to get a snack, and they're like, ah, shit, there's guys here.
Yeah, and then they kind of went, well, I already got up. I may as well talk to these guys. And so I was like, man, people in animation are so friendly. Everyone's always coming up every day, you know.
Right.
And then our nickname was the vending machine boys, I guess, apparently.
I don't even remember too much of the Sony days, except for the fun. And that was my transition into being a professional artist. You know, I mean, I had done a couple things prior to that. Like I tried to get into Image when they were hot, and I had done some stuff for Malibu Comics. I did a couple pages in the Mortal Kombat book, and then the bottom kind of fell out from Image and the whole comic book world. And I had a friend of mine, a guy named Roy Bordine, who was doing animation. He's like, dude, you should try animation. It's easier, and you get paid more money. You know?
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah. But he left out one thing. He left out one thing that I learned pretty quickly was
the man.
No. I mean, if you're being paid you're thrown into the waters of all these really amazing animation artists, and you're getting paid to learn how to be a better artist. You know, at the same time you're doing this job. I mean, I never went to art school, but working at Sony and various other studios, that was the art school for me. You know, and meeting up with people who were generous with their time, and kind of showed me some stuff here and there. I mean, it was just that's the best thing about working in animation is like you become a better artist. You know.
Totally, yeah. I would agree with that. So you were not. Did you ever have plans to go into animation when you were first starting out, or did you want to do comics first?
It's always been comics, you know.
Comics?
But even though I've always done my own comics, I never considered making a living out of it until there was this comic book store in Glendale I used to frequent, and the comic book guy, his name is Sam, I forget his last name, but he was kind of a trippy dude. But I had shown him some of my work, and he's like, "Oh, I should introduce you to Steve Siegel." And Steve Siegel worked on, various books, but one of my favorite Steve Siegel books that he co-wrote with Matt Wagner was the Sandman book. It was Vertigo title. And so I showed him some of my stuff, and he gave me some advice. And then I don't know, at some point I ended up living in the same apartment complex with Steve Siegel and another friend of mine, a guy named Troy Hubbs, who was inking, he wasn't inking when I met him, but later on he would become Travis Sherris's inker on the Wildcat stuff that they were putting out.
I remember that stuff.
Yeah. And then I met Sean McManus. We all kind of lived in that same sort of Burbank area. And then the bottom kind of fell out after going to countless San Diego Comic-Cons and standing in lines and just being completely.
So Ed, with Sean, you're in then, because Ed and I first worked together on Extreme Ghostbusters, and then I think Ed stayed at Sony when I went on to Warner Brothers, but then we reconvened about 2 or 3 years later at Stanley Media.
Oh, right.
The animation company / money laundering company.
Right.
And I think Sean McManus was working there.
I met Sean prior to that. In fact, I think Sean turned me on to Stanley Media. In fact, yeah, he recommended me. And speaking of McManus, I just saw some of his work recently, and I had this moment where I was like, man, I know I made the right decision to go into art because, you know, McManus was a little bit older than I am, but the stuff that he's doing right now is just phenomenal. You know, you don't have to get stuck at a certain level in art. You know, if you're endlessly hungry for it, you can just get better and better, you know? And
Right.
Sean McManus's work right now, his inking style is like Wrightson-esque, dude. It's like beautiful,
Excellent.
delicate,
Cool.
delicate.
I think that's a really interesting point, Ed, like, because I feel that I did comics for a really long time. Then when I finally got into animation, that I learned more about art by being in animation than I had in the 20 years I've been doing comics before. And that's just because you're right. Everyone around you is so generous with their time. And also everyone, like if you're on a show, it's in everyone's best interest that you are as good as you can possibly be. So everyone takes an interest in making sure you have all the information you need and you get what you're doing, and that it's a super supportive community.
True.
Yeah, these days comics are more sink or swim.
Well, I mean, I think me and Ed and Jeff have been lucky, and that's mostly been the case. I think we've worked for some not particularly generous, selfish kind of like, look, it's your job to get it. I'm not here to, you know, tie your shoes people too. But I would say that mostly people are pretty fantastic. Like I remember I hadn't used Storyboard Pro for a couple of years because I'd been focusing just on doing character design. And then they were going to keep me on something at Warner Brothers. I think it was like a series of Vixen shorts that our friend Phil Barassa did the beautiful designs on. And I remember that I needed the work at the time. And so they're like, you can use Storyboard Pro, right, Steve? And I'm like, sure. And then,
That's the only answer.
Right.
and then I just luckily did this thing where it was like Chris Copeland, who we all know is such a great and generous guy and super talented, and his brother Justin, Matthew Humphreys, like Will Ruzica, like probably 10 or 12 storyboard artists were in just like in my immediate like 30 feet or something. And so what I would just do is I took the job, and then when I had a question, I'd go to Chris Copeland first because he was closest to me in proximity. And then 20 minutes later, if I had another question, I just move on to, you know, Will Ruzica. So I was never overburdening one artist too much, and I just went through my rotation. And in the course of like 2 weeks, I managed to actually then know how to use the program. And I think I bought everybody a toy at the end just because it's like, all right, you all went above and beyond here. Thanks for letting me get the job. But a lot of people, I guess in different industries, might have just been like, yeah, fuck you, you know.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I still can't really draw that well in Storyboard Pro. There's just something about drawing in vector that just kills the English of my line.
It is trippy.
You know, I mean, like a friend of mine just picked up an iPad Pro, and he was asking me like Procreate or Sketchbook Pro, you know, and I was like, dude, get Sketchbook. I've tried Procreate, and it's nice. It's got a lot of Photoshop elements in it that Sketchbook Pro doesn't have, but Sketchbook Pro is more intuitive, and the pencil to all the tools just they just react perfectly. You know, I guess that's just me personally, but it just feels easier to draw on Sketchbook Pro. But Storyboard Pro was just tough. It's just like you just have to just break it down to the main shapes and just keep the action and the information clear, and you know, move your camera around, and you know, and hopefully it comes out okay. But you know, a lot of these times, like talking about Arcane and Arc, the show that I was on, a lot of the times the schedule doesn't really allow, you know, the schedules nowadays in animation, it's so bizarre. I was on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show for 4Kids long time ago, and we had a 3-week, I was doing boards, we had a 3-week schedule. It was staggered. We had a 3-week board, and then a 4-week board, and then a 3-week board, and then the 4-week board. And on the first 4 weeks, we had a meeting, and they told us, they're like, hey, you know what we were saying about the 4-week board thing? Well, it's really 3 weeks, and you have to ask for the 4th week. And now you're doing a show with 4 Ninja Turtles. All of them have 2 weapons that they have to use at all times.
Right.
And they're playing 10 ninjas and 2 bosses, and you're just like, oh man, that was like the hardest animation job I've ever had.
Man, did they give you the 3rd act a lot?
Well, you know what they were doing, here's the tricky thing. They had a stinger that was like the 3rd act.
Okay.
Right? To get you into the episode.
Right.
But there was always like a lot of business towards the end of the whatever act it was. Act 1 had to have a bunch of business to bring you into Act 2. Act 2, you resolve the business, story, and then more business at the end of Act 2. And then Act 3 is like your big, your big thing. You want your heavy guy on that Act 3.
And it's so hard to come back from commercial break, keep everyone's interest, finish that fight scene, set up the entire next scenario, and then get into a gigantic fight scene, or even a 3rd act, the huge climactic action scene. That's it's always so brutal.
The honor and the burden of receiving Act 3 in your handout,
Right.
It's like on the one hand, it's a giant vote of confidence, and on the other hand, it's like a death sentence to your life for the next 3 to 6 weeks.
Man,
was that the Chuck Patton Turtles show?
Chuck started it off, but when I got there, he was gone, and I was working with Roy Bergheim on that one as well.
Gotcha. So that was post Stanley Media.
Yes, and Tom Ryder was on that show.
Oh,
yeah, he was doing boards, I think.
Yeah, he started out doing boards. Hey, Ed, can we jump to? I have some of your comic book stuff that I wanted to show people before we go back to Arcane.
Sure.
And did I miss our announcement of drinks yet? This is
no, we haven't
drink and
talked
draw.
about
This is a drink and draw affiliated program.
It is
Satellite show, basically.
What do you got there, Steve? Hang on, just 1 second.
All right. Well, representing for the non-alcoholic drinking people, I'm drinking some sort of ginger brew from Maine Root, and holy crap, is it gingery? My throat is on fire, but I'm sort of in love with it at the same time too. So
there you go. Scott, are you drinking anything apart from Doctor Strange?
My usual.
Oh, I love that. Nice.
Scott Collins
Easy peasy.
Nothing if not loyal.
I'm just drinking this clean duster.
Nice.
Don't do that.
Fresh. Keep it fresh.
Just
exactly. Sadly, I'm on vacation. I have nothing here. I'm on the beach in Laguna, and I was gonna show the beach, except that it's dark and you can't see anything. So I'm just in here.
Watch out for the humanoids of the deep, though. Those guys, they love Laguna.
They definitely will get you. All right, Ed, let me put up a little bit of your stuff. So apart from doing all the storyboards, you still manage somehow, and I'm amazed to continually put out a comic book. How do you do that?
Shit ton of comics.
Yeah.
Kudos, man.
That is such a great cover.
Yeah, that's it. That's basically not having a life.
Yeah, fair enough.
It helps if you don't have a life, That's really basically what it boils down to. My ambition is so great that, I'm willing to sort of forego all the other normal stuff that people are, doing.
So when you do your comic book stuff, are you 100% digital? Do you draw everything, or do you work on paper at all?
Paper. So basically, paper is part of the process in the sense that, what I would like to do is go out to a coffee shop with my headphones on and have a coffee and sit there and just kind of do sketches and kind of figure out some stuff, board some stuff, So paper and pencil is part of the process. When I want to work fast,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to kind of tap into sort of stream of creative consciousness, you know, where you just sort of like you just let the ideas flow.
Right.
You know? So for the way I do my books, for the most part, is I tell the story visually. It's a Marvel method, and then I throw in the words later, you know, because I know how long I want to stay in a scene
Mhm.
and how long I want to be in a little sequence. To you know, there are parts where it's scripted and I have to go off of the script, you know, but it's like it's not a script that you would turn in or anything like that. It's just sort of like, okay, here's a bit of dialogue, and then I need to go, okay, OTS over here, punch in over here, cut to that over there,
Right.
you know. So pencil, and then I basically pencil the whole book out in you know, little thumbnails, and then I scan those. Well, I would scan those into my computer, and I take those drawings and I just start popping them down on the page, and then I digitally draw over those thumbnails.
Gotcha.
Ooh.
Now, Almighty Ed, that's the one that you worked on in Prague, right?
I worked on all of my books in Prague, but Almighty was the first one.
That one was like start to finish in Prague, right?
No, I went back twice to finish. I
Mhm.
started it in Prague and then I finished it in Prague. And actually, can I do a share screen?
Please.
All right, let me see if I can do this here. Share
So one of the things I love about your work, Ed, is just apart from the storyboards who I've studied and they're impressive, is your comic book stuff still has that really cinematic feel to it.
Mm.
And I definitely think that is something that after years of doing storyboards myself, I tried to bring into my comics, but it's difficult. It's difficult to capture the motion of storyboards on a comic book page, but you seem to do it really, really well. How do you edit, how do you make the shift from doing a cinematic storyboard to having a cinematic comic? Because you have to make different choices.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Just to give you a little background of what I'm showing here, this is I'm remastering Almighty and I'm coloring it because Almighty was black and white, and I'm working with my colorist from The Warning, and this is what it's kind of looking like. As far as to your question, you know, and maybe this is to my detriment. I don't make that distinction between comics and cinematic storytelling in the sense that it's always just my approach is cinematic.
Okay.
You know, it's not necessarily comics. And it's funny because I redrew the first, I want to say the first 7 pages of Almighty at least 9 times until I realized, I figured out, I was like, okay, wait a second. Let's not do a whole page design thing. Let's just approach it as a series of storyboards.
Okay.
And all of the information will be inside the frame, you know, and that's why I don't have characters breaking frame. I don't have like these really ornate sort of Neil Adams-esque type of page flows going on there. Maybe Michael Golden does some of that too.
Mm-hmm.
But once I realized that I'm only going to work within the box, it freed me up. It's like,
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And then I was able to just tell the story within the box and not worry about page layout. And then, so I'll thumbnail the whole thing out, and then I have an idea of how many panels I want on a page. So the max is like 7, you know?
Right.
Then I'll just plop them in there and see where the break happens. You know, I want you to want to turn the next page, you know, so the last panel has to be something that makes you want to do that, or you're wrapping up something, you know, from the previous pages. So that's how I approach it. You know, I just kind of, it's in stages, and I don't want to get bogged down in page design. I just want to tell the story visually, and I think it kind of works against me, in particular with The Warning, because people, comic book readers, they don't engage in comic books in that way. Most of them, when they turn the page, the first thing that they look at, I mean, they glance at the image, but what they really look at are the word balloons. They read the comic.
Yeah.
And then the visuals, they kind of accentuate what's being said for the most part, because there's a lot of you'll read something and then you'll see what you're reading, in comics.
I was actually going to ask you about that, Ed, because I saw a different video recently where a younger artist was tasked with the idea of redoing a Jack Kirby page and doing it in her style. And it was really interesting how she broke it down. But after a few minutes of watching how she wanted to lay the whole page out and have this thematic theme for all the panels and how it was all going to work and she was going to try and emphasize this or, play with these different things to do it her way, which is all cool. But the one thing that I didn't see what she was planning out, and maybe I missed it, but she never talked about where the word balloons or the caption boxes or any of that were going to go. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. You're making a really neat page, but I don't know if it's going to work in the end because I haven't seen you talk anything about where these caption boxes and everything are going to go. You made all these really interesting panels and this flow between all the panels and all this stuff, but I don't know if you left the space for the words.
Yeah, that's a good point. I leave space for the words within the box.
Yeah. No, I noticed that in yours. It looked good. Yeah.
But sometimes I get into trouble. But then,
Right.
It's sort of like, okay, well, it hasn't really been too much of a problem, because there's a lot of negative space in my work. So, it'll fit for the most part. And my books are not very
Chatty.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, one of the things that you do have, and this is Bad Summer, like your compositions are always pleasing, and there is room to breathe, so you can put in as much dialogue as you want. But the pictures really do tell the story. It's almost like watching a silent movie.
And yeah, like I was saying, I think it kind of hurt me on the last book, to be totally honest, because that's Pistor. That's Ed Pistor. He's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it kind of hurt me the last time because there are people who just didn't understand it. And it's funny because I have a producer in Canada that I'm working with, and we're trying to make an animated series of The Warning. And my pitch was like, and this is before Arcane came out, I was like, look, there is a place in the animation space that's being completely ignored, and that's like adult animation that's not The Simpsons or Family Guy or any of these other sort of more, actorly driven stories, especially in science fiction. Something that could be like esoteric and mature, kind of like an Aeon Flux, but you're talking about bigger themes. You're talking about conflict, you're talking about war. So my approach with The Warning was I wanted to do a science fiction military action invasion story, but directed by Terrence Malick, And the hope was I was marrying two different genres, your sort of tentpole, Tony Scott, Michael Bay movie, and then the introspective art, the hard art of Terrence Malick, And I think the average comic book person is not really ready for something like. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, the audiences in the last 10 years, we have both narrowed and expanded to so many different audience groups. Like we have access to reach all those kinds of people who would like this kind of story, but sometimes the stuff gets lost on the shelf because there's
a million books per month.
Because there's a million books, right? So I think that we have the ability to reach everyone who would really dig it, but getting them to see it is going to be the issue.
I think in the animation space, though, Ed, you make a good point. Like, And I feel like maybe, speaking of our show that we're talking about, that, Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix is an example where there's maybe a little hesitancy to pull the trigger, like say Arcane had the benefit of the video game company, and it being an established property within there and stuff, but the fact that there's sort of been that dipping the artistic toe in the pool with something like Love, Death, and Robots, where, and maybe now with all the streaming services, I feel like even within like the quote unquote primetime style shows of, that started off with The Simpsons and Family Guy, and they all had sort of a certain kind of look, and they've all kind of derived out of that. Like I worked on Big Mouth, and it felt like a descendant of those kind of shows, but it feels like the sheer volume of shows now, we're seeing more and more experimentation from feeling like, okay, look, this sort of adult-driven animation doesn't have to have this particular aesthetic. More than one aesthetic is acceptable. But yeah, it'd be fun to see, a Star Trek, like as an animated. I mean, there is that new one, but it still feels like it's at least somewhat geared more toward kids.
Well, more towards the Simpsons crowd.
Right. Well, we'll throw in some. We'll go back to one of the things I think it was beautiful about the opening of Arcane is just how sophisticated and mature.
Yes.
And kind of basically upsetting the first scene is.
Yeah.
Because we see the violence that leads to the creation of these characters.
The character designs are just, and later on, the costumes are just stunning. I mean, just beautiful, ornate things. And I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, how are you doing this?
Time. They made it important, right?
Well, it's another French animation company, isn't it?
Yeah, Ortiz, I think it's called.
Yeah,
Ortiz, yeah.
Well, that's, interesting too in terms of, I think looking at the storyboard, there's 1, 2, 3. So there's 12. There's 12 artists listed as their storyboard artists, mostly all French. But then they have the pre-visual storyboard artists is a guy named Dustin Wick, and someone that I know that Ed and Jeff and I all know and consider a sensei is Sung Kim. Is one of the
Really?
Yeah,
pre-visual.
Yeah, Sung Kim did some great stuff.
And when they say pre-visual storyboard artist, it makes me wonder, like, wouldn't surprise me, did Sung actually board like half the show, and then did the French artist sort of reboard going off of his boards or something? Because Sung is so talented, and his boards are so rendery too, on even like a 2D show. So I feel like I can see a lot of him or Eric Canetti or some of the different artists that we know that work at Riot in a little bit of the look of this show. And the production.
Well, there's so much the video game seems to come through.
And it's what a great, crazy visuals. If you freeze frame any shot of this thing, you just think you're looking at a painted still image. It doesn't seem like it's that you're looking at a still image of it from a cartoon. It looks like you're looking from a still image from a painted comic book.
One of the things that's really impressive about this show is the camera movement.
Mm-hmm.
There's some amazing rack focusing, and it looks like they swap out, or swap in an anamorphic lens where everything is, you got this really shallow depth of field, and everything on the edges is kind of blurred out, and characters move into that and move out of it. There's a lot of specular dust on the lens.
Yeah.
Episodes. A lot of amazing, lens flares. I mean, I sit there and I think, how would you even, like, if you were doing like revisions and you had to call out all the things that you're seeing here, how would you do it? It's like,
right.
It's like they build the environment, I don't even know if they're doing motion capture or capture performance or anything. They must.
It seems like some of it is.
Yeah, because and this is this style is I think they've conquered the uncanny valley.
Agreed, totally.
Because I watched the new Resident Evil animated show that just dropped recently on Netflix in the hopes to carry on the high that I got from watching Arcane. And it's pretty, it's obviously a very beautiful show, but the skin kind of looks rubbery and the eyes are way better nowadays. But having the exaggeration that you have in Arcane and the sort of 2D cell shading, I don't even know if that's what's happening here, but that's what they used to call it, 3D model and then 2D cell shading over it.
Right.
They've really perfected it on this show, dude, where you're getting little tiny business, little tiny like looks and acting that, it reads and you know exactly what the character. It's like acting, This is just like next level, dude.
And I mean, to your point about the way there's racked focus and there's definitely the CG motion of the 3D world, but also it feels like they did a lot of just 2D painting in the background to really get the effects to be so smooth and integrated.
Yeah. And the sound design too.
Particularly on a lot of the smoke effects look like they're actually animated in 2D as opposed to 3D.
Right.
Sometimes. Which is something do you guys see that trailer for that new DreamWorks, The Bad Guys?
Yeah, I saw it.
I thought I really liked the style of it, and it looked like again that they're playing. I mean, I guess we owe Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse so much gratitude, not just for being such a spectacular movie, no pun intended, but the fact that it really seems to kind of blow up what's acceptable in terms of what you can do stylistically, that you can do different aesthetics, and now that it's been a few years since it's come out, we're seeing, big budget things pivoting and trying things that are less traditional to what we've seen before.
I would say that Arcane transcends animation.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the kind of thing that someone who would never take the time to watch anime, would actually sit down and watch, because the visual language is it's representative of the very best of television, prestige television. This is like, I consider Arcane to be like the Sopranos level, like HBO, when you look at the Sopranos shows, they're like movies. There's a level of finish and creativity, and towards the later episodes, there's a lot of introspection and a lot of really artistic choices. Like, at the end of an episode of The Sopranos, they would play like some punk song, or some kind of song that takes you out of the sort of mafioso song that is a personal choice of, the primary creative on the show. And they do the same thing with here. Like the end credits songs are fantastic.
Yeah. The music is amazing. I was definitely thinking about that while I was taking screenshots of stuff. But Ed, I wanted you to take a look at this one shot when you talk about that it's Sopranos level storytelling, that it's this.
I was just looking at that shot. It's so great.
That it takes just the straight up mechanics of doing a storyboard and something as simple as those foreground elements that point in, and then the angle of the light coming in from off screen, and just where those two characters are positioned. It makes you feel that moment.
Yeah, and you see the little embers kind of floating back there, and you've got this. Go ahead.
Atmospheric perspective on the building that's receding, rule of thirds, composition in terms of, like where they want our eyes to be.
I think it's also dramatic because it is like this profile shot, and a lot of the shots during this whole sequence are all very much moving towards you, moving in, moving out, in, out, a lot of push and pull, a lot of 3D kind of feel to it all. And this is then just, it stops it all, and it's only about these people facing each other or dealing with the situation.
Mhm.
It's a nice pause.
But it's, right, they're doing. I like what Ed's saying about the right, because The Sopranos and that style of show that HBO helped pioneer is a little bit like when you're trying to do everything that you love about a movie and everything you love about a novel, like a novel where you have more than enough time and space to explore all of what's going on with your characters, and that's sort of now become the norm in like a certain level of television. And this, right, Arcane's kind of like everything you love about a European graphic album, you know, combined with everything you love about anime without the things that are off-putting to some people that don't really know or understand much about anime. You know,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great way of explaining it.
Thank
Well,
you,
Ed,
and I knew there was a good reason we wanted to have you on the show.
Earlier, you mentioned that you think that they've solved the uncanny valley, and I think that that's a really interesting observation, because that is one of the things. So my wife appreciates animation and she appreciates this kind of storytelling, but she really loved this show, and she didn't know anything about it, and I just put it on, and I think one of the things she responded to was the depth of emotion and how well they portrayed the most subtle of expressions in a way that even though cartoon and the characters are video game animation exaggeration characters, like there's so much heart and believability in the designs that I think that they've cracked that code.
But I do think it has to do with what Ed said too. I mean, in a way, I don't know if the uncanny, because the show has a degree of stylization, you're not dealing with the uncanny valley in a way. You know what I mean? I feel like the uncanny valley is the enemy of when people are trying to make it too real. You know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe this is Arcane is the answer to that. You know, because
Yes.
it is a stylistic choice to make it hyper real. You know, and maybe to the detriment of the overall project.
Exactly. Yeah. Everyone stop trying. Just get great designers to make non-hyper real work. And
Well, I mean, what's important is that you relate to the emotion. That what's believable is not necessarily the texture of the skin, but the emotion that the character is experiencing.
Yeah, you don't want them to think about it. You just want them to buy into this world.
But I think a degree of stylization helps you do that. Like just going back to that classic Scott McCloud understanding comics things, where he's sort of describing, you know, the levels of stylization, and to some degree, you know, we can all project ourselves more into Charles Schultz Peanuts or Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes, you know, like, or Hank Ketchum's, you know, Dennis the Menace, when things are not so specific, and the more realistic they become, the less general they become, you know.
Right.
Well, it's
One of the
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say on that same note, I saw a review a long time ago about the animated Disney Tarzan movie, and one of the last sequences of Tarzan as a small kid not being accepted by the dad and everything. He has that nice chat with the mom gorilla, and he shows that in the review. It was on TV or something. Anyway, and it's a great sequence, really full of heart. You know, really brings a tear to your eye, all that kind of stuff. And he stopped after that and he said, "Look, because it was cartoon, because it was drawn, we just accepted it for what it was. If this was live action, this or whatever else, I think this is all before CGI or at the beginning of CGI stuff." But he said, if you try and do a live action or anything like that, you'd be sitting there going, "Oh, I don't know if the fur is right on that gorilla. I don't know." You know, you just start questioning things because it's shooting for real in those other opportunities. But because it was the cartoon, because it was just the Disney, it was the flat drawing stuff, you just accepted it for what it was. You knew it was a drawing, but you could just forget all that and disappear into that story, that world. That's why I love cartooning.
I mean, maybe it could, as you're saying that, Scott, I'm thinking, okay, maybe hyperrealism is more of a technical approach to storytelling, or a technocratic approach to storytelling. And the other way is more of artistic approach where the goal is to make you feel something. So the difference between someone like Michael Bay compared to Terrence Malick, in a very strange way, there is connective tissue between those two because their visual language is so pronounced. You know instantly when you're watching a Michael Bay product, and you know instantly when you're watching a Terrence Malick product, and they both polarize audiences.
Right.
When I saw the first Transformers movie, I mean, I wasn't a big Transformers kind of guy. I was more of a Battle of the Planets kind of dude,
Oh, I like you more even there.
and Yamato, I was more into Yamato as well. But there's that scene on the freeway where one Transformer is transforming, and we're looking down at him, and it's broad daylight, and you're just like, I was so blown away at what I was seeing from this Michael Bay experience. I was just like, dude, it's like a bunch of practical cars on a real freeway, and they frame the shot in such a way that they know exactly how big the Transformer is going to get as it's transforming towards camera. And I'm just like, not everyone can do something like that. You can't.
Right.
You have to have a really strong visual language. But by the same token, I mean, Bay is more of a technical artist, visual artist, and then you get the Terrence Malick where he's looking for the shot. He has an idea of what he wants you to feel more so than what he wants to tell you. And he's hoping, from my limited perspective of how he works, he wants to work in concert. He wants to capture moments as opposed to manufacture moments.
Yeah.
And when you look at Arcane, they're able to successfully convince you that this is a real world and there's a camera there, and they just happen to frame the shot like this, as opposed to sitting there and going, okay, let's do, perfect example. Let's do her in the middle of this. It's sort of like, okay, let's just drop the camera right here, and there's going to be some great light coming in from behind her, and her uniform, her outfits are just fantastic. I love this character. Unfortunately, I don't remember her name.
Well, one of the things I think that is when you're planning a shot, one of the things that you do when you read the script, at least when I read the script, and I'd be interested to hear what your approach is when you get a script, is as you go through, like, what is the most important moment in the scene? How best can I get to this moment in time, in the moment in the character's arc? And you sort of pick that tent pole, and then you build the rest of the drawings around that. And it's always hard to that's where I think the real storytelling happens, is like, what is the high point of this moment? Like, are they entering the room? Are they standing still? Or is it the scene where they, where's the light going to hit? How do I express what I think is the most important aspect of this moment in a drawing?
Yeah, it's weird because I think a lot of that stuff is dictated by the script. There's the rhythm of the script, but a lot of scripts that I've read, one of the biggest problems is that the writer is not thinking visually. They describe things happening within a particular scene that it's impossible for it to happen. Like
that's always a bear. You're like, what the?
You're like, wait a second. He's over here. He just came into the room, and you wanted him over here on the other side of the room, catching a thing that's falling. Do you have any idea? You have to set up all of those elements.
Yep.
And the screenwriters just don't have that visual thing down.
Well, I guess that's kind of our job is to extract that. I mean, Jeff, you talking about, and you're so good at this with action, I definitely need to get, where if you're thinking about some of those shots in the Arcane title sequence where it's like, all right, well, we want this money shot of the guy jumping. How are we going to work in and out of that or something?
Right.
It's my brain thinks of it more in terms of like, speaking of what Ed just said too, where it's like, all right, you've got a group scene in a storyboard, and everyone has to say all these different things the way it's written and do all this stuff. And so very often you can't storyboard it straight ahead. You have to kind of reverse engineer it, because you're like, okay, at the end of the scene,
Right.
Shaggy. All right, I'm not thinking of the show I'm on. I have to think of a show from the past. Shaggy's going to say this to Scooby, and this is going to get knocked over. So that has to be that's going to happen at the end of the scene. So that affects where everyone's walking, who's standing next to who, where the camera is, all that stuff, and the whole lead up into the scene to make that moment happen.
See, but the thing about modern day animation production is nowadays they commence the storyboard process before everything has been designed, particularly the backgrounds. Yeah. So with that last shot that you had of the Arcane, the last shot that you had, where they're standing on the roof.
This one.
Okay, if you're storyboarding, right, you're not thinking that you're gonna have these cool elements that are covering the windows, these sort of I don't know what you would call them, like these sort of like shade, like stone kind of shade elements, shapes above the windows there.
Right.
You're not thinking of that, But if you have an idea, it's like filming. You go to the location, director looks around, they're like, "Oh, what do you think of that fence over there?" Yeah. Maybe we can shoot through the fence.
Right.
What's the time of day when we're going to be here? Where's the sun going to be? And the DP sits there and they look at they do the tabulations on their computer, like, okay, well, if we're shooting in March, the sun is going to be coming up over here, and this is what we can expect, for the weather. All that stuff is not factored into the typical animation production. And what Arcane does is it raises the bar of this type of animation. I hate to even just limit it that way, where everything pales in comparison. You're not going to see another Arcane anytime soon. No one's doing it. No one's giving it this kind of time. And I'm sure a lot of this stuff has existed for several years in the video game cutscenes that they've been making.
Yeah, they've been working with this studio for a really long time, since their first, I think it was the Jinx video.
Which I've never seen. I got to watch that.
It's great.
What you say, though, Ed, too, reminds me of like another thing that me and you and Jeff all worked on at the same time was season 4 of Transformers: Robots in Disguise.
Yeah.
And the different, like, say, when we all came onto that show, right, it had already been running 2 or 3 seasons, and the masterful Vince Toyama was the BG supervisor, and they had that other, unlike a lot of shows, it also had an art director, right, Christoph. But but so I know I had been doing design for a couple of years before coming onto that show, and then I was so grateful. It was such a great way to get back into it and level up, because almost everything that happened in the show in like the regular in the non-new locations, not only had Vince designed every aspect of it, but it had all been built in SketchUp too. There was CG models of it. And so it, like just that shot in Arcane we were just mentioning, when you've got existing CG backgrounds to be able to do your storyboards in, what it allows, it allows you to level up so much more, because you can move the camera and start shots, selecting just like Ed was comparing, like just like being in a real live action space where you're just going like, okay, well, here we are at the prison. Where am I going to put the camera? Like if you're already in the digital location. For a little while after that, on a lot of the boards I worked on, if I didn't have a background, I would try to rough out a CG background on my own, or one of the directors I worked with, this guy, Frank Parr, who's a bit of an animation legend. He started doing that too, just because it gave you such a huge leg up, and it allowed everything to hook up better. Also, I mean, it solves so many problems, both artistically and pipeline wise.
Absolutely.
You know,
Well,
I'm sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I
Oh,
was going to say that.
it's your show, man.
You go.
Oh, a couple of years ago, I had the great honor of working with Gareth Edwards, the guy who did
Oh yeah.
Rogue One and Godzilla. He reached out to me. Uh, it's one of those things where I can't impress on everyone who's going to come across this part of this show. Always check your junk mail. That's where his email went, and I happened to see it, and he was like, yeah, I'm working on this new show, and I don't know if they're going to keep this title, but it was called True Love at the time, and he was working in the way that he did Monsters, which was like he was going to shoot a bunch of stuff in Asia, and they were going to retroactively apply CG things onto characters and make people robots and backgrounds and stuff like that. And there was a sequence at the back that he wanted my help on, and I got to tell you, man, that was like one of the biggest compliments. I'm still, I get so emotional when I think about it, But no, that's one of those things I'll never get over. But
it's amazing.
What he was talking about was going into the volume. I think it's on the west side somewhere near Culver City or something like that. Where they shoot like the Mandalorian and stuff like that. Going into the volume with a camera, that would allow you beyond the image that's on the LED screen, but being able to like see virtual props and stuff like that, and set pieces, and being able to sort of factor that into your camera movements.
Oh wow!
Is like the next. It feels like, when I look at Arcane, I feel like this is the crystallization of that type of thing. It's like the sets were built, and these people were able to. I mean, who would think that this shot you wouldn't just normally, or maybe the French guys are just that good. This could be a painting, sure, but all this ornate stuff below her, you wouldn't think of that just normal, organically,
Right.
But it just feels like
that world exists, right?
Exactly.
So you get to pick the shot that shows the best version of that moment because it already exists in a 3D space, in an intellectual space, and it's already artistically real. So you get to pick the best shot.
Exactly. You get
in some ways, maybe it shows like this and Primal and stuff like that, where they do spend this extra time and energy on all this stuff, that maybe it'll prove to the business side of the companies that means this stuff can also stick around longer, that it's more viable for a longer time because it's so impressive.
No, I mean, you bring up a good thing to hopefully be optimistic about, Scott, I think, which is that as we break more and more out of the original sort of network for broadcast commercial mold, and the more we keep creating things for streaming and stuff, then it's right. Like, why do things have to have these particularly traditional schedules? Why does it need to be this amount of episodes done in this timeline or for this thing? Especially since my understanding in a lot of these cases with streaming is like, they've got the subscription base. It's not like when you go to the movies and you have your opening weekend. You know what I mean? Like it's not quite as cause and effect, I think, in terms of the capitalism of it. Of like, okay, did you have a huge opening weekend? Then that determines if you'll get a sequel, if you're this, if you're that, or whatever. But so if we're used to doing cartoons on this certain schedule, or movies for that matter, but maybe now they don't necessarily have to be on that same schedule if they're not being released in the same way.
I think that's a good point, Steve, because I definitely think that this kind of quality has legs, and that it can be available for a lot longer, and that the profit margin and the profit arena stretches so that you have time to find it. It can build word of mouth, and it can stay up longer because the more time you spend in the beginning, the longer it will last.
Well, because so very often, not always the case, but so very often, some of the things that have turned out to be timeless that we really respond to, basically what happened is that people killed themselves on it, and they put like, way, way, way more time and energy into it than is really reasonable,
Right.
And they did it on some sort of crazy timeline, plus there was some magic and stuff coming together, but you're giving more of an opportunity for that when you, obviously we all need deadlines.
Right.
Like it doesn't tend to work if there aren't deadlines, but maybe not having it be where it was just understood that, well, of course we all work 20 hours out of every 24, and that's how you get, brilliant.
Right.
This character was awesome.
Yeah.
Like towards the end, it's like, man, this guy is so cool.
Well, I think one of the tough things about doing a show like this is I want to show as much as I possibly can to inspire people to go see Arcane, but I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to spoil anything, but with a shot like this, a shot like that,
it's beautiful.
Invest the time, watch the series.
The scale is so great.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a slow burn as far as the story goes, but I did make it to the second episode one of the nights, and it started to move along pretty fast as far as I was concerned. There were a lot of extra layers immediately in the second episode, a lot of new characters, a lot of different angles on the same thing. Mm-hmm. So that actually when I watched the first episode again, I'm like, oh, that's what that means. Oh, this means that. Oh, cool.
It definitely has that approach in the first episode, I'd say, Scott. Sometimes with like some of the greatest shows that we've ever watched, they just have spectacular pilots, right? Because the pilots had to sell the premise. Like Breaking Bad is one that occurs to me, right off the bat. It's like, that's an incredible pilot. It does so much. Starts with Walt in the underwear in the desert, goes through the whole thing, and then we end up there. But a show that I always think about that didn't do that, and this is what Arcane reminds me a little bit of, is The Wire. Like The Wire's first episode is like, we don't really give a fuck if you watch the next episode or not. We'd like you to watch it. Don't get us wrong. We're interested in making a show, but it felt more as if the whole first season got picked up and they were trying to do it in the first season. Because I remember it wasn't until maybe the fourth episode of The Wire where there's that moment where half the characters are trying to move a desk into the office and half are trying to move it out. It was like that moment and the way all the characters reacted, like that's when I realized I was hooked. And that was the beginning of the fourth episode. So thank God I did stick with it. But Arcane felt a little bit like it didn't just have to make a pilot to sell itself. Like they already knew they were moving in, and so they weren't trying to sell you. They're like, look, this is a story we're trying to tell.
Right. One of the things I love about the show, and I think one of the things I love about the world building of any great property is look how lived in this cityscape is.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the things I love about, and I tend to spend a lot of time, as Jones will tell you, designing my world before I ever start drawing anything, because I want everything to be believable. I want it all to fit. And so that I can just drop someone in the world that I'm creating and it all makes sense.
Jeff definitely loves a shot like some of those ones that we just saw. Like Jeff has done some truly remarkable cityscapes, like in his new comic that the world hasn't seen yet, and in Way of the Rat. And sadly, I think if anything, I foolishly and naively, when Jeff was first developing this new comic he's doing, he did these amazing character designs, and I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. And back in high school, I had inked Jeff. Like inking is sort of was my backdoor into trying to become a professional artist first. And so, like, look at these; they're so beautiful. I'm going to just for fun ink these character designs that Jeff did, and I did them reasonably quick. And I was like, hey, maybe I could ink Jeff again. This is so fun. This is so great. And then Jeff started to hit me with the pages that have cityscapes like that last one. And I was like, I'm out. It's not going to work.
I mean, it was rude. What's funny, I mean, you guys, we talked about Tom Ryder earlier, and I remember Tom
Poor
came
Tom.
all the way out to Florida to work on Way of the Rat, and then one of the first 2-page spreads, Ed, I hit him with was a gigantic cityscape with someone flying a dragon kite in. I remember and back in the day at CrossGen, we drew the 2-page spreads on like double size, super dense paper. And I remember plopping that on Tom's desk and just seeing his face.
Wait, what size were you working at?
So for the 2-page spreads, it
This
was,
one, right?
yeah, we didn't just put two 11x17s together and tape them together. We actually had
Well done, Scott.
2-page. Oh, there you go. Oh, thanks, Scott. Yeah. Hang on a second. Yeah.
Look at that madness.
Poor Tom. Look what I did to him.
Oh my
Well,
God.
in Jeff's new unpublished comic, that's why I was almost like, maybe I could just ink the characters. I don't think the backgrounds need to be inked because you've already
Look at that
basically.
insanity.
It's
Yeah.
totally insane. Jeff is
No.
insane. We can all talk about it.
I mean, it's a trip because this is not surprising to me at all, because the way you approach anatomy, you have a very
There's
deep
the
art
dragon guy.
style. You know, you can just keep on looking closer and closer, and you're there. You've got a line there that, you know, that's it's not a shallow approach to the work. You know, it's like you can just keep on looking deeper and deeper, and then, you know, like you know, before I even met you, a huge fan of Wonder Man run, and you know, beyond the anatomy, that really was impressed on me was the use of backgrounds. You know, and then Image kind of came into town, and then backgrounds kind of fell out and just became a bunch of pinups, which, you know, I think the ultimate distillation of that visual language is someone like a Brian Hitch, which
Oh,
he's
yeah.
going to give you backgrounds, but then he's going to give you a double page spread where the Hulk, you're only seeing like his fists and his head, you know, and then
Right.
ground going up. You don't even get the full thing, and you're just like, whoa, you know. I mean, that's like Hitch, dude. He's one of these deep guys. You just keep on looking
Yeah.
and looking deeper, and he's there.
His stuff is ridiculous.
But for sure, Ed, I think what's always been fun and annoying and daunting about Jeff's work, whatever, is that, you know, like, it's really fun and playful and superhero-y and pushed in all the best ways, but there's always the sense that Jeff is working from a thing where it's like each panel is as if he's cut a hole in the universe and you're looking just from that perspective into an existing world. The backgrounds and the perspective has been worked out properly. It's not faked, you know, and
Right.
people's anatomy and the large cardboard boxes and the robot metal things and all the different things that are, you know, those have all been worked out. And so you're seeing it's a very easy buy-in because you feel like you're just peeking into a real world where Hulks and Optimus Primes and Harley Quinns really exist and run around, you know.
And it feels like if the shot is like a medium shot where you're only getting this, that, but you're seeing the background and the ground plane, it feels like that character is on the correct ground plane. You know,
Yeah.
with Jeff's drawings, it feels like he's drawn the figure and he's just punched in, and then this is the image that we're going to be drawing. You know, that, you know, that's
I do.
the level. Go ahead.
I do a lot of the drawing that you see on the page, and in your work too, Ed. Like, there's like what we see is the shot, but beyond that shot is everything else.
Right.
And then, yeah, because I've seen your layouts and I've seen the way you move the camera in. I'm like, look, it's all there. And sometimes I really kind of wish that we had more behind the scenes storyboard stuff, you know, attached to, in the same way that Jackie Chan used to have his stunts. I would love to see more of that stuff happen in animation, where you get to see, like, here are the boards, right? Here's how the initial thing is, and then pulling out, especially if you're doing Toon Boom, you have all that extra space that you're never seeing, that you do all that work.
You know, as you're saying that, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking how normally I don't like these sort of process videos that you see a lot on like TikTok or whatever, Facebook, social media.
Right.
But I'm endlessly fascinated with what Scott's doing here.
Right. Yeah, right. It's fun.
It's just,
Like, one of the things that's great is watching him just casually draw awesomeness.
yeah. I feel like there's a lot of Michael Gold in here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like especially in the hatch lines going into solid blacks on the uplighting of the face.
Yeah.
And you know, it's directional, and it goes with the form, and then the eyes. You know, figuring out this sort of dark shadow and down the middle, the sort of what do they call it? Core lighting down the middle of the face is always
Yep.
for me. I'm terrible at it.
Mm.
And then to have the balls to do it like non-digitally, you know,
Yeah. No Control Z. Yeah.
exactly. I've been drawing in my sketchbook, and I go, "Oh, wait a second," and I try to hit the button to undo. Like, oh, fucking
Yeah.
God, you know, what am I doing?
I definitely do that all the time. Yeah. Well, man, we're hitting, like, getting close to an hour and a half. I think we've gotten through all the reference that I put up. I would like to take just one last time, Ed. Like, so what book are you working on right now?
I'm doing this remaster of Almighty,
Okay.
and partly because I know, like originally it was published 8 years before Fury Road came out,
Okay.
and my main character is very similar to Furiosa. I'm not saying anything beyond that. I love Fury Road, and watching Fury Road, I was like, okay, it can work.
Right.
Instead of having these meetings with these executives saying, would you want to make her a guy? You know, those are the kind of meetings I was having back in the day.
Yeah.
And for me,
We've all
I
had
was like,
those.
yeah, you can make her a guy, you can make her whatever you want as long as you pay me. I don't give a shit, you know?
Right.
Because I've already done my work. The work exists, you know?
Right.
So I'm doing this remaster of Almighty where I'm basically redrawing 180 pages and having it colored. And once I'm done, I'm about 80 pages out from finishing it.
Okay.
And then early next year, I've already started my next book. It's called Occult.
Okay.
But I'll be working from a pretty detailed outline. And I'm excited to work on that. That'll be my next book. And then after that, I will do the sequel to The Warning, God willing.
Okay. Awesome, man. And were you working in-house these days, or are you working in-house these days?
We're waiting for a pickup on at Lexinotis. And I'm also, can I say this?
Don't give anything away. Don't make it.
You can allude.
Right.
I worked on the Marvel Studios stuff this year, and the show that I'm trying to, I'm in consideration for it, that will start early next year.
Okay.
Awesome.
So hopefully that'll kick into gear too. So very busy.
Excellent. So people,
Awesome.
in the description box, I've listed your website and your Facebook. So everyone should check out your stuff. And the new Almighty, is that going to be coming out from Image?
I don't know yet. I'm just going to get it done first. And
if they're smart.
Yeah, if they know what's what.
I mean, who knows? That would be great. I think Image is a great home for stuff like that. And my experience with Image was fantastic. I like working with those guys. They were very generous and super cool.
Excellent. All right. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to see you. I'm glad that we got to talk about Arcane, which is gorgeous, and talk about it in ways that I really hope inspire people to go see it or check it out, because the work is stunning, and the people who worked on it deserve all the kudos possible.
Absolutely.
And when we were trying to decide, when we knew we wanted to have Ed on, we were trying to figure out if we were going to talk about comics or cartoons. Ed had some awesome ideas for comics to talk about too, so we'll just have to have Ed back on. And then
yeah, which one was on the top of the list?
Well, we want to talk about the elementals, which
yeah.
Bill Willingham. I mean, there's so much great stuff to talk about there. He had an Alan Davis suggestion as well, and Jeff
The Nail.
Yeah. Oh, the Nail is so good.
The Nail's awesome.
Yeah.
The last time I cried with an American comic book was The Nail, and maybe another name. There was a scene in there that was like, oh my god!
I would love to have you come back on and have us go panel by panel talking about The Nail. It's one of my favorite comics too. I'm a huge Alan Davis.
If we do panel by panel on The Nail, though, we got to at least throw a little bit of a bone to some of the elemental stuff too. So we got.
Of course, obviously. Yeah, I mean, there are many great comics. There are many great things to have deep dives on. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and wrap it up a little bit. Ed, thank you very much. Steve, Scott, guys, thank you very much for coming on. Please check out all of our various internet sites in the description box and like and subscribe. And then let me play us out with this bad boy right here.
Sing it, Steve.
Normally, I'm not usually on camera when I'm making funny noises.
Yeah, hang on a second. All right, you can make as many funny faces as you want. Here is our out card.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, you, Ed, again.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.